the monuments are not the end game, right? The goal, you don't build a more equitable world and society singularly by taking down monuments or by putting monuments up. What monuments are, as I said earlier, are sort of symbols that reflect the stories that communities and countries are telling about themselves. They are entry points, right? Like they are the thing that demonstrate the sort of narratives that pervade a community. Um, and so for me, part of what, the taking down the monuments in New Orleans is not going to make New Orleans, going to create racial, like economically egalitarian schools in and of itself. What it does is it serves as a catalyst to conversation, a catalyst to reconsiderations of public policy decisions that do have profound impacts on how people make, live their lives and the sort of material conditions that are part of the world that they live in. And I think that more broadly, part of what I hope How the Word is Passed does, part of what I hope Just Beneath the Soil, the World War II book, will do, is disabuse us of the idea that these histories were a long time ago, right? Like, in the context of How the Word is Passed, the woman who opened the National Museum of African American History and Culture in 2016, who rang the bell to sort of symbolically open the museum alongside the Obama family, was the daughter of an enslaved person, right? Not the great granddaughter, not the great granddaughter. The woman who opened the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. in 2016 was the daughter of a man who was born into slavery. My grandfather's grandfather was enslaved. So when my son or daughter sit on my grandfather's lap, I imagine my grandfather sitting on his grandfather's lap. And I'm just reminded that this history we tell ourselves was a long time ago simply wasn't that long ago at all. We talk about slavery as if it was this thing that existed when the dinosaurs were around. Like it was the Flintstones, the dinosaurs, and slavery, like all hanging out at the same time. But there are people alive today who knew, who loved, who were raised by people who were born into chattel slavery. So the idea that anyone would suggest that this history has nothing to do with the contemporary landscape of inequality, the idea that anyone would suggest that it has nothing to do with what our social, political, and economic infrastructure look like today is morally and intellectually disingenuous. And I think part of what I want How the Word is Passed to do, part of what I want Just Beneath the Soil to do, is to, I bring up this word proximity often, but like, is to give us a different sense of not only physical proximity to these sites, but a different sense of our collective temporal proximity to this history. That to have us understand in the scale, in the scope of human history, these events were just yesterday, right? And I think in doing so, it helps us to more effectively understand why it is so important to remember them, to commemorate them, to engage in a constant proactive process of discussion, memorialization, and remembrance, so that the ideas, the ideological positions that undergirded and served as catalysts to these things happening, whether it be the Holocaust, whether it be slavery, whether it be segregation, whatever, that we can see them and name them and identify them before they represent an existential threat to all of us. And so I think that we're in a moment now where it is being revealed how important it is, because there are people who would prefer that we don't tell these stories because they don't want to have to tell different stories about themselves. But that's part of what it means to be human. We all have to tell different stories of ourselves, because who we understood ourselves to be 10 years ago, 20 years ago is different than who we understand ourselves to be now. And I think we really want to push to people that that's not something to be scared of. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something that is this opportunity we've been given as people on this planet. to constantly learn and to constantly become a better, more thoughtful, more curious, more empathic version of ourselves. And I think that engaging with history represents a real opportunity to do so.